Welcome to the show. Glad to have you on. I'm Phil. I'm a partner at Webisoft. We build custom software, and we started this podcast because our marketing team told us we needed a podcast. So here we are. Can't beat them,
Awesome.
join them, I say. So, Eric, do you want to maybe talk about your career so far, your role at your current company, and little background about you?
My name is Eric Klotz. I work with a company called Andmere. Andmere is a oil and gas technology provider. I've been with the company since 2008. My original role was business development, so sales. In the beginning of the company, we were doing a lot of work into Asia. So what would happen is state-owned oil companies in China would come to a group of um, companies that had a proven track record for integrating technologies into the Chinese oil and gas space, and they would do showcase projects. So the showcase projects would be solving a technical challenge. Most of the technical challenges that we were working on were related to produced water treatment and enhanced oil recovery, or the facilities as they relate to enhanced oil recovery. So at the beginning of my tenure at this firm, I was traveling around Europe and the United States and Canada and evaluating produced water treatment technologies and figuring out how to license and buy international produced water treatment technologies, principally for treating produced water as it goes back into some sort of an injection mode. So if you have, river water, surface water, groundwater, and you treat it and make steam, once it goes into the ground and comes back as produced water, there's very intricate processes involved to be able to clean it to regenerate steam or regenerate.
Hmm.
We were involved in produced water for steam generators, produced water for what was called tight reservoir reinjection. So in oil and gas, as you probably know, we use a lot of water injection to
Yep.
enhance pressure in the reservoir or to flush the reservoir. In the early teens, there was a lot of tight reservoir work done. So the specification for the produced water was very tight. So we needed to get, fairly other industry type produced or water treatment technologies and integrate them into PetroChina. So that was the beginning of my career in 2008. And we stayed on the facilities side until about 2015. And then I got promoted up to a manager. And then we transitioned from selling technologies into China, principally PetroChina, but also Sinopec and CNOC. And then we evolved into taking what would be a fully commercialized technology from our sister company in China and integrating that into markets globally. And they have, because it's interesting, not most people would know this unless they're involved in the oil and gas space on the Chinese side, is because they need the oil so aggressively during different phases and strategies internally for their overall energy makeup. They are aggressive with enhanced oil recovery. So we'll see them turn out new technology that we see other parts of the world not actually scale yet.
Oh, I
And
see. Because
yeah,
they're trying to just like squeeze every last drop,
yeah,
like be as efficient as possible.
yeah. And they'll go after, like, in Canada, we're doing a lot of this stuff. Like, we're really aggressive with new tech as it relates to oil sands or multi-stage
Hmm.
fracturing, and the laterals get longer, and then the bore size gets bigger, and then the drilling tech improves. But over there, they'll be doing stuff that we're doing kind of 5, 6 years ago, but they'll do
Hmm.
a lot of it, and they'll do polymer floods, and they'll do, cyclic steam, and they'll do steam floods, and they'll do in situ combustion. They'll commercialize all that, and they already have. So there's a lot of lessons there for the rest of the world that people don't really realize. So, anyways, we exploited that, and they never lose capacity like a Chinese firm. including our sister company. Our sister company is a company by the name of Haofu. The company that I work for is called Andmere. So the founders of Haofu, the son and daughter, are Andrew and Miranda. So Andmere is the name of our company after his children.
Okay.
Yeah. So we marketed those technologies, including like exotic tubulars. We never really got anywhere with the water treatment equipment in Canada, but we did do well with the exotic tubulars. And the exotic tubulars were like certain types of insulated tubulars, exotic screens that go for sand control. And we were manufacturing those either in our own facility or in suppliers' facilities for import into Canada, and a little less degree in the United States, and maybe a trial or two in the Middle East and Africa, but most of it was Canada. And then the evolution of the company from there is we reshored that manufacturing. So it was sort of an evolution where it was like in 2016, it didn't make sense to build anything in Canada. It just didn't seem like it made any sense at all, because the Chinese state-owned or joint state-owned private, they're just so big, and they never lose capacity. But then something shifted kind of 2018, 2021, where, supply chains became critical. So we reshored a lot of the manufacturing just south of Edmonton in a place called Nisku. And we have a successful sand control liner business there in a 30,000 square foot facility. And we focus on sort of the bread and butter of the industry, which would be like the low tech perforating and putting stainless steel shrouds in sand control liners. And we do that almost principally or almost exclusively for thermal heavy oil. So that's kind of the main business that I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for the sales of the sand control liner business. And then we have another business unit, which is we call it AdHeat. And it's a Chinese technology that was developed in 1998. And it's been used in China somewhat, but now it's starting to get some exposure in markets, like kind of not in Canada, not in the United States. But it's close in the United States, and it's kind of difficult to sell into Canada because we have so many different opportunities. But anyways, this technology, we deploy a single phase induction heater into an oil wells that have viscosity issues. And right now that business unit is busy in parts of Eastern Europe. We're busy in Gabon with mostly French producers. And it's really deployed to solve wellbore viscosity issues. And it's popular in parts of the world that have, very high flow rate in their oil wells or their gas wells, but then they have some sort of viscosity issue in the wellbore. So they can afford to intervene in the well because the flow rate could be, hundreds of barrels per day for an individual well, but the well is plugging either due to hydrate or just viscous fluid. That's essentially it. That's the job I do, is handle the sales for those two principal business units.
So you described it's doing very well in specific regions under specific conditions. Is that why you think North America is just not necessarily a market for it? It's just like those conditions are not necessarily here? Or?
No, they're here. I really think that, so I marketed the induction heater, this business unit we call AdHeat. My goal in 2015, 16 was there's 245 different oil companies that are headquartered in Calgary. I wanted to talk to all of them, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them is just, a rancher who has a couple wells. And then some of them, thousands of wells they drill every year. Yeah. So they do have the problem. It's just philosophically placing new technology in oil and gas. Like if you were to talk to somebody, and I have friends that have new tech that are struggling with the same thing, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place. The new tech doesn't have a place, or it doesn't have an angle. And you would think if it were a good technology, or if it were something that made sense, they would have done it already. But I find in oil and gas, and I don't have a lot of exposure to other industries, so I don't know what mining's like. I don't know what traffic or road building is like. But if you have a good idea, eventually it'll pick up. But I find there's a real lack of integrating new technology into oil and gas. If because they have so much momentum, like we still use pump jacks, like they still have the same completion design in conventional wells that they had in 1975, right? So there's a lot of like that worked then and it's going to work now. And if you change the artificial lift budget just a bit, then it's difficult to do. And I find in Canada that we've got so many different opportunities in terms of types of reservoirs, and a lot of it we don't even go after anymore, right? Like we've got this huge coal bed methane play that just doesn't get activity anymore, whereas in Australia coal bed methane is huge. So I think Canada's just got so many different opportunities that for you to solve one technical challenge in one corner, if that technical challenge exists, they just go to another corner.
Mm-hmm. I heard from somebody else that oil and gas is very much like if one software works very well or one piece of technology works very well, they kind of have to see it work with someone before they all decide to use it. So is it kind of like it just you need one cell essentially, and then
Yeah,
they'll follow
totally.
potentially?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they will. So we're looking at some interesting stuff in a heavy oil play. We call it Clearwater, but that's not a real good description of what it is. It's cold heavy oil production in around sort of central eastern Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
And they've developed this really cool drilling technology where they have all these, it's like they're calling it fishbone. It's like they have one trunk line down the middle, and then they have all these laterals going out. And they could have 100 laterals going out, and it's all open hole, so they don't line these holes. And the technology that they put into that drilling it's impressive, and it was just developed over the last like 5-6 years. Now they're all doing it. So once they see one guy doing it, and like the drillers kind of developed it, even though it was the brain trust of people inside, I think Cenovus
Mm-hmm.
Husky, they were the ones that were first to do this. And I don't know that to be true, but I know that they put a lot of work into R&D. And now once you see them do it, then everybody does it just really quickly afterwards. And it's commercialized quickly. So in that space, we think putting heat in that trunk line with our tool would have a certain amount of uptick. And if you can get the right company to try it, then they would all do it. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just getting the right company to try it.
They
Because
need
if
one
you're,
success. Yeah.
yeah. And then also it's interesting that if you have, a decent sized oil company will have a certain amount of, one rig in a region would be fairly typical. If they're doing one rig and it's part time or they're moving the rig around, they might do, of these sophisticated wells that I'm talking about, they might only do three a year, with all these laterals, and they might do three a year. So if you try something in one of those three wells and it doesn't work, well, that's a major investment gone, right? So
Yep.
you need to
Yeah,
find the
that's yeah.
company.
Good point.
Yeah, the company that's doing 300 of those wells. Well, you know what? Probably four or five of them are going to fail anyways. So
Yep.
it's finding that company that's doing a lot of it and then trying to experiment with them.
Yeah, because they can afford to make a mistake,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah. And the payday's big for them too, right? If it works, it
Yeah,
improves
yeah.
it. Yeah, then they can multiply that improvement over multiple wells. But for right now, we're seeing a lot of companies reach out just based on the idea of applying electric heat to an oil well, and they're
Mm.
more or less coming up with the idea themselves. They're like, hey, if we put heat here, and then they go into Google and they type in electric heating, well bore heating, or downhole electric heater, and then they're coming to us. And most of those companies are in parts of the world where the problem is severe, and electric heat is one of the 6 solutions. So from a vision standpoint, we always looked at it like it might not be the right tool for everything, obviously, but it'll be amongst the tools. And as long as we can be amongst the tools, then that's where we want to be. It's like, you can reliably apply this electric heat in a commercial setting, and you can use it in the space of these criteria, and it'll solve the problem. So that's sort of my challenge right now, is to figure out how to talk to as many people as I can and how to market successfully so that they know, oh, if I have those criteria, and like that's a larger challenge than it sounds, just to make sure that you talk to as many people as you can. At the same time, we're actually very busy just with the leads we got, and each one of these projects is fairly custom, so we have to spend a lot of time, going through the details of the.
That resonates. Yeah. We build custom software, so it's funny because exactly what you said. I mean, it's kind of, and this is why this podcast exists to a degree. Is we want to up the marketing game and up the brand awareness game, but at the same time, we are quite busy as well. So it's almost like kind of forcing growth a little bit. So in your position, what takes up most of your day?
Well, until recently, so we hired a person to work with me. We got a seasoned sales professional, very technical with an MBA. So before that, I was doing a lot of upkeep. Like I would be looking after the website, I'd be looking after everybody's LinkedIn accounts, and I would be doing a bit of that, and then I was doing all the sales proposals and all the outreach. So if we had lots of leads, I'd be doing the proposals for those leads. But then recently we brought in somebody that could take off some of the workload. And then really, this gentleman really improved our overall sophistication when it came to this particular tool that I'm talking about. So it relieves some of the pressure on me to move back and develop a marketing strategy and look at doing some more macro stuff.
Yeah.
So we're still a small team. Inside the business development, there's engineers that help design stuff. They could be categorized as sales engineers, but they're more design engineers that handle the particular materials we need to apply into the oil well to have the tool succeed. Yeah. And then there's 2 of us in the sales world. So right now we're managing these detailed proposals, which take about a week to develop if they're done properly. And we're doing, sometimes 3 to 6 of those at one time. And we're learning that, okay, so for the longest time, we would just sort of chase these opportunities all over the place. But now we're refining our criteria to geologies which we know would benefit from the tool and have the highest chance of success. So right now I'm refining that approach. Okay, we don't need to chase customers in a certain part of Latin America because we know that the tool has been used there, it's tried, and we can't use electric heat to, improve the productivity of those wells to a significant enough degree for it to make sense. Yeah.
It's a harder sell, essentially.
Yeah. So that's what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to refine our approach, because the stuff that we're doing in Gabon right now with these producers from Europe is the heating tool is going to change the metrics of the project. And if it works, they are going to try 3 wells. They're not just going to try 1. And it's a fairly, robust design, which is commercial to us. And when it works, it's going to improve that project a lot, right? So it's funny that in oil and gas, I don't know if it's like that in, say construction or something in the resource space, like forestry or something. But for you to get the economic benefit, it could cost $50,000 per well and change the metrics of the well by triple. Like you're producing, before you were producing 20 barrels and now you're going to produce 60 barrels. And they still balk at that $50,000, right? So it's just a function of the industry is really, really the net back needs to be overwhelming for them to try something. And we're
Because
finding
there's a
companies do
chance
that.
of failure, you think, or why? Why is that?
I think it's, yeah, there's a chance of failure. I mean, for sure, but it's not going to change the reservoir, right? So the reservoir will still be the same. I think it's just a unique element inside the oil and gas sector where if it's not already proven for
Yeah.
5, 8 years, then there's a hesitation there.
Kind of goes back to our previous point about, they need to see it work before they green light or they're interested. So it's really kind of a if it's not broken, don't fix it mentality a little bit, where they don't get
Totally.
excited unless like it's a slam dunk absolute winner.
Hmm.
So you're saying like small increments of optimization are not super interesting to them. They need to
Exactly.
see like this is a game changer, like this is going to change our entire process. And
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Totally.
um, on the sales side, you mentioned your team two. We added somebody to the team. I assume that's a fairly like it must be hard to get somebody with the technical understanding. Like to obviously, sales are hard, but then technical sales are even harder potentially, right? Where they really need to master the subject matter to sell properly. Is it hard to find people that fit that profile, or is it mostly like a training thing?
Uh, it's hard. Yeah. The most recent hire just fell right into it within a few months. He understood everything, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a very unique
Yep.
scenario. We've
Mm-hmm.
tried to fill different sales roles. We tried, maybe we'll go with more of like a VP operations type person that has
Yep.
a macro understanding of oil and gas,
Mm-hmm.
because we still have, we do a lot of manufacturing in Canada for a separate business unit, which is, fairly straightforward in terms of technical. It's like there's intricate weld procedures and there's, some metallurgy questions, but on the enhancement tool that we've been talking about previously, there's a lot of nuance. So yeah, it was very difficult to find people to fall into it because it takes 2 years to sort of be
Then
category expert in
yeah,
that.
know what you're
Which is,
talking about. Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then like, I know because we've struggled with the same thing. It's obviously not as technical potentially at all times, but us we sell custom software, so it's not like you're selling something that can be easily defined in a box necessarily, right? In your case, I think it a little maybe more defined, but the box is very deep. All right. So
yeah.
you need to know like every single detail of how this works and why and how it's going to interact with whatever environment it's going into. Same experience for us is like it's been extremely hard to find people that can be an extension of, let's call it, the sales leadership in place, right?
Hmm.
Where without bad habits from maybe another industry. So I assume like whoever you're hiring kind of almost has to come from the oil and gas industry, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many little tools that are just a given, right? Like there's so many little, oh yeah, you can get in the wellhead through there, which you would say to somebody in another industry, and it would just all seem gobbledygook. And like all the little connections and all the,
Yeah.
the tools. Can we bypass that tool? That one's ported. This one's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then when you go offshore or even to somewhere where they have these safety mechanisms inside the oil wells and you got to figure out how to bypass them, it's definitely a nuanced space. It's like people inside the oil field service side of the business that are in the well. It's its own language. It's,
Right. And
once it
then if
goes
you
below
don't
the
use
surface.
that, then you instantly lose trust, probably.
Yeah, well, and like you can't go with custom stuff. You can go with like the cable itself is going to need to have some sort of oil and gas related criteria, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you can use an ASTM metallurgy and they'll be like, oh, okay, that's fine. Or then you can use, an enhanced metallurgy, and oil and gas engineers will definitely understand that. But it'll need to fit the existing clearances, and it'll need to have some sort of off the shelf tool to be able to seal it into an oil well, to be able to, have it connect, outside the oil well. So yeah, it's definitely specialized and it's unique to the industry. So it's in my world, it's all coil tubing, wireline, and people that do slick line, and then permanent monitoring, like sensors downhole. That's kind of the space where our tools are. We fit in with those particular industries because if we can't gravitate their skills and products towards our technology, then there's no way to get into the oil well. It just be
Mm-hmm.
like a different language.
Yeah. Yeah. So we touched on it a little bit earlier, but talked about like resistance to change, for instance. But what's an example of an outdated process that you're still stuck with? That's kind of maybe a result of slow change or.
I've got specific examples. So we worked really hard in the water treatment space and like the direction. So in produced water treatment in Canada, so we have a unique scenario where in thermal heavy oil, so SAGD, that's what we see typically. It's in situ. We're injecting steam into the reservoir in these long laterals, and we have an injector and a producer. It would be in situ outside of mineable. But inside mineable oil sands and in situ oil sands in Alberta, there's zero liquid discharge. And this was set by the regulator at the very beginning of this oil sands. It was not the federal government and the provincial government of Alberta, from a regulatory standpoint, said they would not allow producers to release that water to the surface. That's why we have tailings facilities. That's why we have all this environmental discussions in general. But really, it's a good regulation. If that were Detroit or Hamilton or something like that,
Right.
that water would be in the Great Lakes, right? It would be, it would be treated and pushed to surface, and it probably would, concentrate the contamination. There would be, anyways. So the regulators decided to do that. So it pushed all of the operators to these large central processing facilities that were required to treat, 30,000 sort of minimum cubic meters of water a day. I find in the tech space, because I was there trying to sell equipment in that space, the de-oiling stage, they were using inefficient technologies and a lot of chemicals to be able to recycle that water back to steam generators. And you would have to go, because we were working with, at the time, it was a Dutch company, but then the license was inside an American affiliate. So the American affiliate had this technology that came from the food industry. And the food industry had developed a more efficient de-oiling technology, which had its place in produced water. And we use this technology. It's the difference is like the version that they were using in Canada and Bakersfield, California, was more of like a resonance. So you put bubbles, micro bubbles into the water, and you float the oil to the top, and you do it over a long surface area, and it's called induced gas flotation. Well, the technology that we were using in China in plants that we capitalized these plants, treating produced water in a similar makeup as in Alberta. We used a dissolved gas flotation system. So it's a bit of a different nomenclature, but essentially you're using this parallel plate pack and you're playing with your hydraulic surface loading such that you can float more oil in a smaller space, and you can improve the de-oiling of this produced water treatment process so that the equipment downstream can now get cheaper, but also it won't plug. So it's the term is called carryover. They were experiencing oil carryover in Canada to a large degree. So we had talked to everybody in that space. There's like 12, 15 companies at the time. They all had the same problem and they all agreed with the solution, right? That was the part that was fascinating. So they were like, yeah, your system is more efficient. However, the engineering, everything was already in this beaten down track where it was like, that's already approved and that's already what we're using. And we would rather the devil we know than to incorporate this new technology. And since they've moved to like a offshore version, but there was that little period of time where I experienced it firsthand, where you had the right technology, you had the right people involved. Our partner, who was manufacturing this equipment, was of the most sophisticated water treatment experts in the world, and we could sit down with these engineers and be like, "Hey, we can lower the footprint, and then we can give you up to a 98% reduction when you're at 90% right now. We can give you a full 98 or a full 8% removal of oil and emulsions, and you could reduce your chemical footprint." There was all these different advantages, and they would agree that those advantages exist, but still not do it. So that was fascinating to all us, and we had a pilot plant for them to try, and they just never tried it. So I can see why, they're very expensive plants, and when you incorporate this change, the operators need to change. But I found that to be like a uniquely oil and gas experience where it was,
Right.
you know,
Well, from what I see for the work we do, for instance, sometimes the blocker is just the fact that it has to go through a whole set of regulatory approval, right? Do you feel like that might have been the case there, where it's just
yeah,
they just don't even want to have the headache?
yeah, it definitely is an element in there because they had their regulatory approval for a separate design,
Yeah.
and the regulatory approval was like 3 years ago.
Yep.
But then I don't even know that they would have to go and change like the regulatory. There wouldn't be a regulatory update. They already had approval. So maybe I find
Okay.
that there's just like an entrenched mindset where it's like,
Yeah.
we're going to do what we did because we know that, and we're going to do it again. And that was just it. That was just, we just gave up. We were close. We were close. Like,
They wanted to see, how bad you wanted it.
right. We worked hard. We worked so hard to get into that space. And it's luckily that we have the kind of management that is like, they never give up. They never give
Right.
up. They're just
Yeah.
like so resilient. So we were selling some tubular products that sort of kept the lights on. And
Mhm.
then they let me and this fellow from Georgia go around and talk to all these different oil companies and do all this bidding. Like, we would get tender packages, which would be for a different design. And then we would present this updated version of the design. And
Yeah.
we even had engineering firms that were like collaborating with us, where they were like, they would go to the oil company and they'd be like, okay, we're going to have two different tranches. We're going to have one tranche with the technology that you're using every day.
Mhm.
That's, this certain type of deoiling technology, which the engineering firm was like, you have an option. There's a new version of this technology that's better. And then they'd have a separate tranche, which was this other dissolved gas flotation system, which it just was more efficient. And the engineering firm would be like, at the beginning, they were like getting declined, where the end user would be like, no, we don't want anything new. We just want cookie cutter. Let's turn it out and let's bang it out fast. And there's good argument for that as well. It's like, we want what we already know, what the
Mhm.
fabricators are used to building. But then the engineering firm would say to them, okay, you need to tell me the justification for using the thing that you're complaining about all the time and saying is inefficient, and not trying this new thing, which is already commercialized in other parts of the world. You could fly to a plant in China, and we could tour the plant and show you the incoming oil and emulsion is just like yours, minus a bit of sand, and look at the change in the productivity. And they just didn't do it. Didn't do it. So I think it's a unique oil and gas thing, but it's also like,
Probably not.
yeah,
Probably not.
probably not.
I mean, it's probably the environment for oil and gas makes it so that that problem, you know, obviously exists, but because it's just the regulatory landscape, the fact that again, like probably a lot of legacy tech,
Mm-hmm.
maybe older management, right? It's kind of an old industry, if you will, right? I'm
Yeah.
thinking like maybe real estate is another one that kind of comes close to that in terms of just a mindset of like we're gonna do what's always worked. We're not necessarily gonna try something new. But I would be very surprised if that was a uniquely oil and gas thing. Maybe we'll find out through this podcast, speaking with other people. when vendors try to pitch you and you as your company, and maybe, and you touched on that a little bit, because you've been trying as well to market some of your products, but where do you feel like they missed the mark as like, hey, this is not at all what we need? Is it when you try to pitch again, like rapid change or like a whole new way of doing things, and you're just beating your head against a wall because that will never happen?
Yeah, there's a little of that. Like we see that at conferences. We have this great conference, which is like right on point with a small community of producers.
Mm-hmm.
And
What's it called?
It's the Thermal Well Integrity and Production Conference in Banff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the best in our space in Canada is thermal heavy oil, and it's the best in terms of producers. They're all there. I mean, they have students there, and they have some years the producers will pick. This year we're going to really invest in this conference, and we're going to do a bunch of papers. But even if they don't do that, they'll at least send somebody there to find out what's new.
Yeah.
And every now and then, not every now and then, once a year, there will be a couple vendors that join the exhibitors, and they could be way outside of the peer group, the space, right? It's like the technology is only incremental changes. You can't go in there and change from an ESP pump. They're using these electric submersible pumps at various stages. And it took them a long time to really develop when they switch from gas flow to ESP, and it's nuanced, right? And then we'll see vendors come in there with a totally different pump system. And you can see from 500 miles that is not going to, they're not going to integrate that.
It's going to be a hard, long road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you came in there and you had a better cable for an existing ESP, or if you had a better way for you to, help the pump in such and such a way, then vendors from offshore could join thermal and be like, oh, that's interesting, right? So it's like these little step changes are usually the best.
So like slightly better cable, slightly better way of doing this, and still fall under kind of the same specs from before, so that it's not an entirely new process to approve, let's say.
Yeah. And then on the, joining the space, let's say you come from one part of the oil and gas sector and you want to go to another part. It's probably the same in other industries too, but we find that also you have to be like complete. Whatever you're selling needs to be complete. It can't be, part way.
What does that mean?
So if you have sand control liner or something that's going to be as a completion tool, if you're just going to offer part of the solution, like if you're like, okay, well, we have this,
and somebody else needs to do that other part, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you're kind of dead in the water. Or if you like,
right.
And also there's like a flexibility element to it of when you're getting in. You have to offer up equipment, be like, here, we'll prove it, we'll pay for it, we'll put it in your well, and that's hard for a lot of vendors, to get over that hump. This is like a financial thing. But typically, if you're investing in the hardware, and it's tens of thousands of dollars in hardware to try it, the oil company is going in for the cost of that well, potentially, right? So that could be $10 million or $7 million, depending on what it costs for them to drill that well. So you kind of have to figure out, your entry point. And also there's already very strong vendors that are in place. Like we kind of kick people in the shins in terms of our market share. We're just sort of a small player in this particular space. And when the supply chain folks sit down and engineering wants to do something, whatever it is, the supply chain will have an existing group of mature vendors who are really strong. They're really strong. And usually they're more flexible, right? Because they're manufacturing, they have multiple different, facilities that can produce
Flexible in what sense? In the customization sense?
Yeah, but also it's like how quickly they can produce. Like we find there's a lot. So there's two different styles of oil and gas when you're in the sort of the well completion or the construction, when they're drilling the original well, like the big OD, the casing and the liners and that sort of stuff. So there's companies that do program work. So think of like Suncor, Cenovus, the large, they do program work where they'll have a certain amount of pads and there'll be 10 injectors, 10 producers. So there'll be 20 wells per pad and they'll have 6 or 8 wells planned in advance and they'll contract their vendors out in advance, right? It's great business if you can get into that world. It's like consistent and ongoing, and they'll tell you, roughly this is how much we're going to be doing, and you got to fit in with the price, and you got to be aggressive, and then you got to deliver on time. But it goes and it goes and goes and goes. That's just a small portion of the oil and gas sector globally. Most of it is like, what can you do for me next week, or what can you do for me 2 weeks from now? Mm-hmm. So if you don't have the capacity to turn one product off and another product on, or, you have night shifts or whatever, because those really flexible firms, those strong firms that can do stuff quickly, I mean, they're the only place you can go really. So from the supply chain people, when they get their budget or they get their go ahead, you might need the product next week. And there's only, then you're limited to the big firms that can do it and pull it off.
Basically, whoever can get it to me next week is going to win.
Yeah,
it's going to win the mandate.
Yeah, totally.
What innovation in your line of work or in the industry in general are you most excited about? Upcoming innovation, let's say, or something you see that's on the radar. Obviously, AI, is up there typically. Anything else you see?
Yeah, I have a friend who's developed a technology. So I like the clean out space. So if you have all these, so if we're looking at what I think is going to make an impact in the sort of 18 to 24 months, I think the technologies that are going to expand those oil wells in the Permian space, so down in Texas, because they drilled so many wells and now they're running out of wells to drill. So I think
there's more room. There's holes everywhere.
Yeah. It feels like the earth is just going to slump in down there because they put so many holes in it. But they have so many wells, and then the good stuff, like the tier 1, everything's going to marginal, right? So they can't continue to drill at the pace that they're drilling right now. So the companies that have the ability to improve the productivity of those already fractured wells, so they're going in and they're multi-zone fracture. The laterals are huge. So there's a bunch of clean out tools that are going to go in and reestablish communication of those perforations. That's a space where I think is going to be, really accelerant. It's going to be.
So would that be like a robot? Or like what would that look like?
Well, right now I think the coolest technology is by a Canadian company called Novus Energy, and they have a plasma pulse tool, which will
sounds like a weapon in Halo, but go on.
Yeah, it goes down to the perforation, and they can, in the right conditions, if the criteria is correct, they have they have a bunch of capacitors that are all in this oil tool, and they can shoot out plasma into the formation and reestablish communication to deep parts of the formation. So if you bring the oil well on strong to begin with, what they're doing is they're getting it back to its original production. So I think things like that are going to be very exciting. And then in our space, like allowing people to produce more because they put electric heat in the well. That would be in that world, but we don't have our criteria isn't as big. Like that tool's that could go into multiple different places.
The addressable market's a little bigger.
Yeah. And then on the surface, it's going to be, automated drilling in your space where you're, going to use AI tools in different ways that you don't have to send people out to wells. Like we're already seeing this now where the SCADA systems, and the SCADA system will be able to report to an operator, you got to go and check well X, Y, and Z, and everything is getting wireless. So the wireless communication side of it is going to explode, I think, too, where you'll have, whether it's hooked up to a cellular connection or satellite, there'll be all this remote technology where people will be able to communicate with those oil wells and then be able to do stuff too, like little solenoids and things,
Mm-hmm.
actuators that can turn on and off. So you don't have to deploy people. You don't have to deploy
Right.
oil wells.
Machine talking to an AI, talking to an AI, talking to a human type thing.
Yeah, totally. That's going to be
Maybe.
because we see that now at every conference. There's discussions about, oh, these guys built an entire, one company is called Cardinal. They're in Saskatchewan right now. If they're not on your radar, you could look into it. They were doing engineering and putting in AI tools because they're the ones that built the most recent greenfield project in sort
Okay.
of our space. And they incorporated all kinds of cool stuff. Most of it, I think, came from uh, Total Energy Solutions or something like that.
Mm.
But underneath that, there's some cool sensors, and the sensors are communicating to each other, and they're putting all kinds of data into the head office in Calgary where they can run that plant fairly automated. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. So we'll see a lot more of that.
I bet. I mean, it's getting scary out there. Um, and it's our fault in some capacity. I know we're coming up on time a little bit. This was great, and I want to leave you with the my last question here. And feel free to add, whichever else closing comments you want to, or anything else you want to get out there. But what is something that keeps you up at night about the next couple of years, if anything?
I'm concerned about. I think that the geopolitics of Canada are
Mm-hmm.
regressing. Like we're in a space where you, the asset prices are going up so fast that it's getting unlikely that people will be able to build new assets, and the regulatory environment is making it so that there's not an influx of capital. Like we figured out how to build machining equipment with capital investment partners, and we were able to reshore. But I know that that's unique in our space right now. People cannot capitalize their technologies because of the geopolitics surrounding the energy sector. So I think that the things that are keeping us up at night is okay. So if we can't, build more plants to manufacture the equipment that is required by these customers, which is happening right now, and we have a trade situation where we can't import from China, we can't import from the United States, something has to give. So either you let us build it and you get out of the way, or you make it so that it's financeable again, which I don't even know what would be the pathway to do that, or we're going to have a scenario where we're leaving so much money on the table, like we're just walking away from these huge opportunities. So
Yeah.
I'd say the thing that I think is the most sort of quintessential that I wish more people were talking about is like we need this like period of time and this the resource base that we have to get us to the place where we can do the things that I think everybody wants to get towards, right? So if we were to take the oil and gas sector, or we were to take the forestry sector or the mining sector, like we as a society, we as Canadians, we need to figure out how to do that quickly and aggressively to fund whatever it is we get to next, right? Because it's obvious you can't just you know generate primary products and expect your society to flourish. But we're locked into that, unfortunately. And how we get out of that, I think, is the challenge for the next sort of 10 to 15 years.
Mm.
And it's not going well. You can't get your products to the West Coast. Okay, fine. Everything goes down through the South, and then they take your product at a discount, but then you're limited to any growth in the space. And we talk to people like our customers at the highest level. They are considering it done. It's over. Don't even worry about it. No more greenfield, no more growth. So they're all just going as fast as they can. It's like we're eating the icing on the cake as fast as we can, and we're just going to walk away from the rest of the cake because
Mm.
the
And the
money
rest of the
people,
cake is, still very good. Obviously, the icing's good, but maybe perhaps the best part.
yeah,
But
and
yeah.
it's happening, and it's happening fast. Where I think the money is already decided that
Mm.
there's no capital investment in this part of the world. whatever assets are already there, we're just going to run them until they've met their life, and that'll be it.
Do you
So, and
feel like that's going to change a little bit with maybe the new admin, or not at all, or
I don't know.
you don't see the signs, you
I
don't
don't.
see
I
the right
don't.
signals at the moment?
That's right. It's very difficult. I don't think that this is my personal philosophy. I think we have a really poor education system, in that we don't give people a holistic approach to these types of things. Like on the practical demand side, if we stop using all the fluid, like we stop, our entire system is set up to, use oil and gas as energy. If we want to pivot away from that, then fine, but it's going to take some more clever planning than what we got right now.
Right.
And if we're just going to say we're going to do it and we're not going to actually do anything, it's up to our society to see that for what it is. And it's like, hey, you can say all those things you want, but unless it's actually, touching the ground, unless you can produce another hydroelectric dam, or whether you move to nuclear, you can't just say all the bad stuff about the one thing that everybody sort of believes and
Yeah.
then continue to do it. It has to have a touch point where it's like, okay, well, let's be more practical about how we transition out of this. And maybe we transition in a quicker way, but then in a way that makes sense, because right now all we're doing is sort of choking out the capital investment. And I don't, you asked what keeps me up at night. It's like, this has, we're going to have a little bit of a crash here in the next 24 months, where there's a lot of oil out there. And then you're going to have, geopolitically, you're going to have the end to whatever's happening in Ukraine. And now you're going to have Russian fluid come on the market in a big way, because the only way that they're going to negotiate out of that war is if they get access to the market. And that's going to be a drastic decrease in the price of the barrel of oil. So it's going to hit Canada hard, and nobody's really prepared for it. And then Venezuela could come back. So I don't know. I think we need people that are talking more clearly about the strategy. Like, if we're going to get away from this and we're going to, go into other markets, other sectors, we can't just be forestry, mining, and oil and gas, because our auto sector is dying. Our, steel manufacturing is low. You can't build another steel plant. I mean, they shut or consolidated all of them. So what is it we do exactly?
I'm not sure, Eric. Honestly, I'm gonna have to go drink after this, perhaps.
Yeah, I just would like to see a more, like, rather than saying this kind of stuff and being so unpopular at dinner parties, just to have people be like, "Oh yeah, I never thought of that," or "Hey, Matt, maybe we should."
Well, maybe you're a realist,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe this will get to somebody in any decision-making capacity, and maybe a wake-up call.
yeah.
Fingers
Hopefully.
crossed.
Yeah,
Eric, this was great. Thanks for coming on.
no problem, man. It was fun. Thank you, and best of luck.